He was on vacation as well, along with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Rumor was, I think he and his family were in the French Riviera. Let's find out where Dave Thomas, voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, spent his week off. Dave, is there, he's got a tan. He could have been in the French Riviera. How was it? How was international travel last week?
Yeah, not quite international travel, but yeah, we got away. We got some golf in, so all was good.
Who's a better golfer, you or your sons?
Do I have to tell the truth? When I'm keeping score with an eraser, I am the best by far, but the young one's kind of got a little edge on me right now.
Oh, listen, hey, if Dad's going to keep paying for everybody to keep playing, Dad needs a couple strokes a hole aside here, all right?
True Dad.
All right. How was it to be back with your second family, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, back on the field at Mosaic Stadium? Bye week's over, and it was time to get back to work.
You know, honestly, it was like no one had ever left because the pads were on, so the intensity was up, the practice was crisp and focused once again. The roster was the exact same as what it looked like when we went to Montreal and came back from Montreal, so no new injuries to report on. It was just a very workmanlike day today for the Saskatchewan Roughriders at Mosaic Stadium.
You've watched a lot of practices over the last year and a half, being the voice of the Riders, and Corey and his staff are very efficient. When you're out there, especially when you're coming back after a week off, what are you watching for, trying to key in as far as some of the things that maybe pique your curiosity?
Well, obviously during the bye week, it's a time of self-assessment, right? So you wonder if there's going to be guys that maybe have earned an opportunity to get some more reps than what they were getting prior to the bye week. So I was counting reps again today, seeing who was where, who was doing what, seeing if there was any movement on special teams. Of course, the new defensive lineman showed up today at camp, so I had an opportunity to see what we were anticipating to see from him. And like I say, special teams is an opportunity for guys to make a mark. There was a lot of work done on that, as there always is on day one of a practice week for the Rough Riders. So just seeing if there was any adjustments made. The one curiosity that I had that I know a number of fans have asked about is Sean Bain Jr. And again, he looks good to go. He played with the second team offense and the scout team offense, and didn't get an opportunity to run with the ones, but he almost ran right into a goalpost when he made a sensational over-the-shoulder catch. So he looks real good. Now it's just an opportunity of when will he get an opportunity?
That's a problem we really haven't had here in Rider Nation lately, is having too many good players on the field that the good guys who are coming off the injury can't grab a spot. So let's recap here. If you're just joining us, it's Dave Thomas, voice of the Riders, practice number 1 of the week as we get ready for Hamilton today, earlier at Mosaic. So no Sam Emilus and no Mario Alford, correct?
No Samuel Emilus, no Keon Schaefer-Baker, no Mario Alford. Those are the big ones. It was great to see Charbel DeBeer. We haven't seen him since training camp, of course, when he went ahead and re-aggravated the knee injury that he sustained back in 2024. So we haven't seen him in Regina. He was on the sidelines today, not in pads, not a participant by any stretch of the imagination, but it was just nice to see that his rehab is at a point where he's back in Regina and continuing to put in the work and the grind to try to get himself back and healthy.
On the Keon Schaefer-Baker front, I see on a lot of social channels, fans, obviously, there's a connection there. Everybody loves KSB. They love what he brings when he's on the field. And we've seen him on the sidelines with a cane. Is he still walking with that? Like, what's his mobility like? I mean, if we get he's not going to be back in the next couple of weeks, but what is he looking like now?
Didn't have, like I said, didn't have a chance to see him today, and we did ask Coach Mace, not point blank, but we asked him for an update and as best as he could give. Again, he's not a medical professional. You can only go ahead and relay what the medical messaging is, and what we're hearing is that it is going to be an injury that will keep him out a bit, but there is a hope that he will come back this season. So it's not a season-ending thing by the sounds of it, but definitely is going to keep him out some time and going to need some things to go his way in the recovery process in order to find himself back in the lineup.
The next man up mentality has come through. We've seen all sorts of, just look at last year at this time. Now, Trevor Harris was hurt. It was a totally different situation. Here we are a year later. Dante Myers, the way we talk about him now as part of being one of the keys to the offense, a safety blanket for Trevor Harris, Keyshawn Johnson role has grown. Who else has, if we look at 12 months ago, who else has really blossomed as far as becoming essential to the becoming part of the Riders starting core?
Well, someone that I don't think gets enough credit and probably should is CJ Rivas, just for his versatility, because again, he's a cover linebacker, so he can take away the pass. He is extremely physical when it comes to the running game. And again, the Riders love blitzing him just because he can get there and get there quickly. And like I say, there's a guy that doesn't get a lot of praise, isn't in the spotlight a lot, but boy, when he comes to play, he has done a lot of great things defensively for the Riders this year. And then on the offensive side of the ball, again, Del Duncan Busby, it doesn't get the numbers, but if you look at his body of work when it comes to the blocking scheme and setting up the running game, Del Duncan Busby, again, in his second year as a pro, has really gone ahead and taken a step forward in my mind. I know he'd love to catch more footballs, but again, when you've got other guys like Dante Myers and who you mentioned, and Keyshawn Johnson just being two of the five that are starting, it's a pretty tough nut to crack.
Hamilton comes to town on Saturday. It's going to be a 1:00 kickoff at Mosaic Stadium. Bo Levi Mitchell, the reinvented Bo 2.0, as we could probably start calling him, they can put up some points. It was a shootout against BC. They ended up losing in overtime, and it was an unfortunate fumble. They could have won their seventh straight easily, but that's not how the football gods had it playing out. What do you see in Hamilton and Bo that maybe you didn't see? Because you've been covering the CFL for a long time. Because even in the past year, from where Bo Levi was this time, basically in the doghouse with Scott Milanovic, who he should be cut, it's over, to MOP candidate again with what he's doing.
It's hard to explain, and I asked that around today with other players and coaches, that what they're seeing in Bo Levi Mitchell, and he's not going to throw caution to the wind. Like he's not going to go like just airing it out for the sake of throwing the deep ball like maybe he has done in the past, but he is much more under control, and he is much more, I believe, confident in the system. Let's face it, again, he had to go ahead and learn a new system last year, and I'm not saying that other players haven't, but for Bo Levi Mitchell, he was in that Calgary structure for so long, and now he had to go and learn a new offense, right? And I think that the key word is trust. He had to trust that what he felt was going to be there, and trust in his coachings and Scott Milanovic that he was going to be okay. And I think at the end of the day, that trust has finally come twofold in the fact that the coaches trust him and Bo trusts the coaches and what he sees. And let's face it, he's got a pretty darn good offensive line and receiving core to throw that football to.
The Hamilton offensive line, I really noticed it last year. They like to play aggressive and run downhill. Now, they're not running anybody out of the building as far as stats go, but they don't necessarily run a ton. So when they do, they have to be effective. And you mentioned some of the weapons on offense. To me, the big one, I know he's been held in check the past 2-3 games, but Kenny Lawler scares me. Kenny, through his career, has had some big games against the Riders, no matter what uniform he's played. All right, so to put on Mace's defensive hat, how do you cover Kenny Lawler? You got to put more than one guy on him. Do you play zero on him and zone everywhere else? Like, what's the key to shutting him down on Saturday?
I think the key for the Saskatchewan Roughriders is that they've got what I don't think anyone else in the Canadian Football League has, and that's not one but two shutdown corners. So they don't have to go ahead and rotate and flex and go around what Kenny Lawler is doing. Now, trust me, the Riders are game planning for Kenny Lawler. They're not going to be oblivious to the fact of the season that he is having or the numbers that he can put up. But when you got Tavon Campbell on one side and then you've got Marcus Sales on the other, and at the start of the year, the Riders weren't flipping. They were staying, right? So whether the weak or the strong side would change, they'd leave their secondary intact. So that's the advantage the Riders have. They don't have to chase after Kenny Lawler pre-snap. I think they can be comfortable in how he is going to match up against the secondary. The only key is going to be that the Riders have to remain assignment sound. So if you've got the deep third, that's your job. If you are man-to-man, you got to take that. If you're Nelson Lacombo, you got to stay high over top, right? Those are just little things, little key fundamentals that even a dipstick like me knows. But again, those are going to make the big difference at the end of the game and the outcome.
Kenny is one of the best 50-50 ball guys in the CFL. If Geno Lewis is the best, I would say that Kenny is in the top 3, and he uses his size to the best of his ability. And what we've seen Hamilton do when it was time to get Kenny going, when he was getting shut down, they would overload one side, basically. They'd put a Tim White out there. Basically, they'll put 3 on one side to be like, all right, there's 3 guys out here. Who are you going to choose? And sometimes that frees it up. Sometimes it doesn't. Hamilton's defense, a little suspect to start the year, but they've quietly started playing better. I'm trying to think, who are the superstars on that defense? Who are the household names and the familiar? You're checking your notes. There isn't a ton. There's not a big name free agent on there. They're just not. Outside of Katzentonis, the safety, there's a lot of guys that just lunch pail. They come and do their job. No superstars.
Well, after watching Stavros Katsantonis play at UBC for a number of years, boy, is he a good defender. And he is.
Oh, yeah, he's a hitter. He's a hitter.
I don't want to run a post pattern on him. I'm just telling you that right now. But Julian Hauser up front, they've got some other guys that can get to the quarterback in a hurry. They've done a good job, I think, of disrupting quarterbacks. So when you disrupt a quarterback, you're not necessarily going to get the numbers as far as sacks and all that fun stuff goes. But you look at this matchup, and again, Hamilton's defense, I think, has been underestimated a little bit. It's going to be very interesting to see. Can they stop the run, and can they stop the pass, or can they do one of the two to make Saskatchewan one-dimensional on Saturday? I think that's going to be the key for the Hamilton defense.
Katzentonis is one of the best safeties and one of the best hitters in the CFL. I'm sure that the rider receivers are well aware of what he's been able to put on tape in the past. And there are plenty of teams, if you make them one-dimensional, you really take away everything. Sometimes Hamilton makes themselves one-dimensional because they just don't run the ball. I think this is the one team that doesn't mind that if they have to. Running maybe once every 7, 8, 10 plays just to keep everybody honest, because Bo can basically, as Darian said yesterday, take and pick apart that soft zone that they're going to give you and just march down the field and go from there. I'm hoping that it lives up to the first place team in the West and the first place team in the East, and we come and have a really good football game. And Dave, last weekend, everybody says those were 4 of the best CFL games we saw all season. Thoughts? Are you in that category? There was some good football in there.
Oh, there definitely was. Absolutely. It was some riveting stuff. I was really surprised how Ottawa-Toronto worked its way out. Like, I really thought that Ottawa might stumble into Toronto a little bit. And I was curious how BC would play against Hamilton, because BC is really a tough team to read. And then, of course, you've got the Winnipeg-Calgary game again. And yeah, they were riveting games. And this one this weekend is going to be off the charts, because for me, this is the start of the Saskatchewan Roughriders season to find out how they are. If you look back at the previous 8 games, the Riders have only played 3 of those 8 games against teams that are now 500 or above. So going into this next stretch of 5 games, right, you've got Hamilton, you go to Calgary, home and home with Winnipeg, and then you play Montreal before a bye week. But you break down the numbers. The Riders' opponents are 25-18 so far this season. They've played teams that are 32-39. So you do the math, it's a pretty tricky schedule that the Roughriders have, one of the hardest in the Canadian football leagues in terms of competition levels, as there's no free spaces, and maybe there aren't any more in the league after what we saw last weekend. But boy, we're going to find out a lot about this Roughrider team over the next month.